Good evening to everybody. Today I will discuss about very important and burning topic. This is the GST reforms, good and services tax reforms. Everybody knows that in Independence Day, Prime Minister has told about the next generation of GST reforms. Subsequently, on August 21st, group of ministers have recommended for changes in goods and services taxes. Finally, the GST Council, led by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, has accepted the recommendation and made some changes. And has been propagated that is a great reforms benefiting the masses, especially women, and it will be implemented in September 22. So it is necessary to examine how much it is going to cost the national exchequer, or how much it will impact our fiscal position, or how much people are going to be benefited, and why government took such decision suddenly. That is the important thing to need to be discussed. First, we must understand what is GST, good and services taxes. That means tax on goods and services. It is an indirect tax. GST reforms was a indirect tax reforms. So first there is necessary to distinguish between what is direct tax and what is indirect tax. First thing, a government has to manage country, so it needs money, and one of the major source of revenue is the tax. Tax is divided by two parts. One is the direct tax and indirect tax. Direct tax, impact of direct tax fall on the payer who pays the direct tax. It means it cannot be shifted. Tax paid on income, wealth, or property, all are direct tax. Taxpayer cannot shift the burden of tax to another, and he has to pay. But indirect tax paid by intermediary, but it burden can be shifted to the end consumers. Service provider or manufacturer pays a indirect tax, but they can shift the tax burden to end consumer. For example, one is the direct tax, is the income tax, wealth tax, inheritance tax, corporate tax, security transaction tax. We don't have a inheritance and a wealth tax. So a person who has to pay the income tax cannot shift this burden to any other. He is bound to pay. But for example, one is purchasing a commodity. This tax has been paid by manufacturer, but he shift the tax to the end consumer. Similarly, one is going to pay the telephone bill. He pays the service tax, but a service provider pays the tax. he shifts the tax, service provider shift the tax to the end consumer. And a major difference is that direct tax is progressive, and especially it is progressive when it rate increases with the rise of income or wealth, all these things. But indirect tax is regressive because poor and rich pay the tax at the same rate. That is important. Poor and rich pay the tax at the same rate. For example, one is going to purchase a car or scooter. A rich man will pay the same tax, poor person will be, if middle class people purchase or poor class people purchase, he pays the same taxes. So the indirect tax is regressive because it taxes the rich and poor at the same rate. For a country, more taxes should be generated through direct taxes, and the direct tax rate should increase with the increase of income or wealth, like this. But unfortunately, in India, percentage of revenue generated through indirect tax by center and state is much higher than the direct taxes. So burden of the taxes fall on the consumer and a common people. And one report, Oxfam report on GST, a survival of the richest story, it has pointed out that 64% of GST comes from 50% of the lower section of the society, and the rich 10% pays only 3 to 4% of GST, while middle 40% pay around to 10% of the rest amount of the GST. But what is important that, so indirect tax as it is regressive, it will be less. Here I want to point out that why the concept of this reform came. In 2000, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was Prime Minister, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, who was chairman of the 13th Finance Commission, under his chairmanship, indirect tax reforms was constituted, and he had recommended so many reforms. Another thing is that we don't have a service tax. Service tax was introduced in 1994. First, service tax was 8% and 2% of on this 2% of educational cess added. But now service tax is 18%. So first VAT was introduced, value added tax, then good and services tax. I am not going to the details of the history. Question is that now there has been much publicity about the benefit of recent tax changes. What was the GST? As you know, GST was implemented in June 30 and July 1. That means in midnight. It started on the June 30, ended in the July 1st, 2017. And at that time, President Pranab Mukherjee inaugurated this. It was also publicized that it is one nation, one tax, one market reforms, and it was considered as the biggest reforms or biggest achievement after independence. But nobody told that it is an indirect tax that will impoverish the masses, that will put the poorer section into quagmire of poverty and starvation. Nobody discussed it. And I have also written many articles. I have written that GST is one of the complex taxes and imposed by another name. I had also written it will impoverish the poorer section of the society. But I had not opposed the GST. I had advocated for reforms. But I had advocated reforms because there were so many taxes slabs. For example, 0.025, 1.5, 3%, 5%, 18%, 12%, and 28% with the cess. There were so many slabs. Around 193 countries are adopting this GST. France was the first country to adopt, and most of the countries has a one or a two or three tax rate. But India has so many tax rate, and it was complicated. And 28% with his cess. 28% was imposed on luxury and sin goods like alcohol, liquor, and luxurious items. And there was a cess was varying till up to around 292%. So it was tax was a highest tax rate. 28% was the highest tax rate, as well as we had a huge number of slabs, which is so it is one of the complex tax system, and I had also advocated for changes in the system. At that time, it was publicized that it is one of the biggest reforms, that it will curb the tax evasion, it will simplify tax system, cascading effect of tax will not fall on the consumer, rate of commodities services will decline. Many things was told, but I think nothing has been realized today. First thing, it is not one nation, one tax, one market. First thing. Second thing, tax evasion has not been curbed because in the last 5 years, around 7.04 lakh crore GST has been evaded. It is government record. It is not my record. That means tax. That means tax is collected from the consumer, but it is not paid to the government. And another important thing, most of the business community, they use different receipts. For their record, they use one. For the consumer, they use another. They collect the tax from the customer, consumer, but do not pay the taxes. Consumer get a duplicate receipt also. And most of cases also, business community do not give the receipt to the consumer, nor consumer demand it. That is the important thing. So there was a huge tax evasion. And another important thing is tax ratio, pre-tax GDP ratio. It was from 2013-14 to 2016 and 17, pre-tax, pre-GST tax GDP ratio was 6.13%. But post GST tax GDP ratio is 5.70%. That means the tax rate has a decline. That is important thing. Only regarding to the GST, what is important, what I want to tell, the taxes that has been subsumed included in GST, this is considered only. So pre-GST tax GDP ratio has a decline. That is important thing. And the GST collection rate, average rate, it was at that time beginning, it was 14.4%. In 2019, it is 11.6%. And if reforms initiated, it is told that it is 99.5%. Actually, this ratio has a decline. It does not mean people have not paid taxes. That is important thing. People have paid huge taxes. There is erosion in their purchasing power, but tax has not been paid to government. That is the important thing. That is not told to anybody. next important thing is GST was what I was telling, indirect tax reforms. It has included state taxes and central taxes, but not all. I am not going to direct taxes. Direct taxes is income tax, wealth tax, inheritance tax, corporate tax, equity transaction tax. We don't have wealth and inheritance tax. But since it was publicized that one nation, one market, one taxes, but indirect tax GST has not included all indirect taxes. And in also new changes, that there is no changes. What is important thing? GST has included central excise, additional excise, services tax, and state tax included in central sales tax, state sales tax or VAT, octroi tax, entry tax, entertainment tax, sales tax, all these central sales tax, all those are included in GST. But what was not included? Central excise tax on petroleum products was not included. Import export duty, that cannot be included, that is technical reason. But states property tax, states electricity taxes, states VAT on the petroleum product, excise on alcohol, tobacco, all are not included in the indirect tax. So it cannot be tell indirect tax, one taxes. There are certain regions, state did not want to include the VAT on petroleum products because they will lose the revenue. State concern is also valid because state manages around 68% of our total expenditure, but they have a revenue generation capacity is around 32%, around, I am telling. So center has to pay more through devolution of fund or transfer of funds, transfer, grant, and so on things. States, since states have to spend more, they need more taxes. So due to this indirect tax, states' capacity to generate revenue was reduced, and that is why they wanted to keep the VAT on petroleum products. And it was also decided to center should pay the compensation for 5 years from the cess imposed on 28% of GST, which was levied on the luxury and sin goods. Now, what has been changed? Now, change has been happened. All the small 0.25%, 1.5%, 3%, everything is silent. That means it will be continued, and this is imposed on all diamond, jewelry, gold. So richer section are consume this, but this has not been increased. This will remain intact. What they have done? 5%, 12%, 18%, 28%. They have removed 18%, 12% and 28%, kept 5% and 8%. 5% is merit good, 18% is 30 standard goods. And 28% cess has been abolished. It has been increased to 40%, which is will be highest. That will be imposed on the luxurious item, costly cars, and sin goods, tobacco, liquor, and so and so. Now, thing is that 99% of the taxable, earlier the 12% the commodity which was on commodity on which 12% tax was imposed, from this around to 99% will move to 5%, and from 28%, around 90% of a commodity will move to 18%. Some from 28% to some will move to 5%. From 18% some will move 5%. There will be some on nil taxes. Overall, the revenue loss, it is estimated that it will be around 93,000 crores. And the center will also generate around 45,000 crores from increase of taxes from 28 to 40%. So net revenue loss will be 48%, and it will be compensated. It is expected to compensated because when reduction of tax will lead to more consumption, and consumption will lead to more taxes. And there is it is also Laffer curve story theory is also cited. Lower the tax, more better is the tax collection. Whatever may be, this is not going to be a huge loss of revenue, but state will be certainly affected. State should be compensated. But what is the important thing is that corporate tax was reduced in 2019 and 20. At that time, revenue loss was 1.45 lakh crores, and it is increasing. Loss is increasing every year due to reduction of corporate tax. And once upon time, revenue generated through corporate tax was much higher than the revenue generated through income tax. But today, revenue generated through corporate tax is less than revenue generated from income tax. So corporates are a major beneficiary of corporate tax reduction. At that time, there was not a publicity from on behalf of the ruling class or government that they have paid huge things, huge benefits to the corporate who are supposed to be richer section of the society, who has supposed to pay higher tax revenue to the state. It was not publicity, but today when there is something is reduced, then it is publicized. Actually, initially the tax rate was so high, and people have been made to pay higher taxes. Now some benefit is given. They have been already penalized for long years since 2017 July. Now some relief is given. Nothing benefit is given, extra benefit. Some relief is given for which they have been giving huge money to the state exchequer, and which is eroding their purchasing power. But it is not thing to be propagated as it is propagating. Another thing is that service constitute the 58% of GST. And service tax was introduced in 1994. That means we don't have a service tax earlier. Now, since service share of service sector in GDP is increasing, and except insurance sector, other service sector are taxed. Health, education are not. Other most of the service tax are taxed by 18%. Before GST, it was 15%, 14%, and cess total it was 15%, but it was enhanced 3%. That means 58% of the GDP was taxed 18%. So in future, service sector, share of service sector will increase in GDP, and government is likely to tax more service sector, less other things. So they have a plan to compensate for the service sector. So today, service sector, services are used. Telephone is a common thing. Everybody is using. So you cannot tell that it is consumed, used by rich only. So when service sector will be taxed gradually more, or more service component will included, then more revenue generator will be created. What is important thing? Any reforms, tax reform is welcome, provided it is compensated by the revenue generation through the taxing the richer section of the society. There was always a demand that 1% of population enjoys the 40.5% of national wealth. 1% population enjoys 21.7% of national income. And income inequality is highest today, and even more than the British era. So when government is giving tax concession, government should have equally tax the rich to generate more revenue. That could have been become a welcome feature. Government has not done this. That is why state is going to be little bit affected, and the government has to take care of the states definitely, because they have to spend more than the central government. But another feature, welcome feature, is that they have reduced the service taxes on insurance premium. They have not reduced on general insurance premium, but reduced in the individual health policy, endowment policy, unit linked policy, term insurance. Earlier, the term insurance, endowment, unit linked policy, health insurance was taxed by 18%. It was too exorbitant, and it was discouraging. And insurance is one type of protection. This was discouraged. It is welcome to abolish this, but the government is not going to consider the group insurance, which government should consider it. But the most important thing is government was pushed to reduce the service tax on insurance sector, because All India Insurance Employees Association, the biggest and representing largest section of the employees from insurance sector, has demanded for the removal of GST on insurance premium. They have made member of parliaments, many member of parliaments also raised question in parliament. Supriya Sule has raised question. Nitin Gadkari had asked question that it is he term it is as a taxing uncertainty. Uncertainty should not be taxed. So it was a today crores of policy holder and future policy holder are going to be benefited because of effort by the All India Insurance Employees Association. So this is also a welcome feature. Overall, what I want to tell that what government has taken, he has given something. He has taken more, but giving something which is not to be celebrated, but which should be welcomed. My concluding remark that it should not be celebrated, it should not be propagated, but it should be welcomed. That should be the approach of public, intellectual, or government. However, government should try to provide health and education free to the people, because that is the major problem. Has become too costly, unaffordable, and eroding the purchasing power of people. It is eroding the discretionary, disposable income of the people. So, if government want to be take credit, it must reduce. It must make health and education affordable to the masses. Tax reforms becomes purposeful when loss of tax due to any reforms is compensated by taxing the richer section of the society, which has been missed in these reforms. Thank you all.